Hi there, fifth grade. So, for every Thursday, we're going to have our teacher talk. And one of the things that I really liked that I saw some of the other teachers at WPA doing was Mrs. Massica. I'll give a shout out to her, and I will give her the credit because I didn't do this. She's been doing kind of a daily read aloud, which is really, really cool, and I think it's really awesome that she's doing that. So I kind of wanted to start my own read aloud to get you guys listening to reading and not just having to read on your own. So, the book that I'm going to start reading, and I'm going to post a couple chapters every Thursday for you guys to listen to, is called The Monsters of Morley Manor. Okay, and this is a book that I actually read when I was in fifth grade. Because when I was in fifth grade, we had something called Authors in April, which is kind of like March's Reading Month. And they had an author come in for fourth and fifth grade, and they talked to us, and we got to a book and all this kind of really cool stuff. So this is the author here. It's really sunny outside. His name is Bruce Coville, and he actually came to my school when I was in fifth grade and talked about this book and actually read part of this book to us. So I wanted to read this book to you guys. Now I'm going to do what I tell you guys to do before you start reading a book, and I'm going to read kind of the summary of the book so we have an idea of what the book's going to be about. So the summary reads, "Don't open the box. Uh-oh, too late. As if having a demented monkey in the house wasn't enough trouble. Now you've got a lady vampire, a werewolf, a hunchback, a lizard man, and some sort of crazy-looking woman with snakes for hair. At least they're not alive. Just don't get them wet. Oh, great. Now you've done it." So, in my brain, I'm thinking, uh-oh, these things get wet, and something's going to happen to them when they get wet. So, I'm going to take this cover off because it's a lot easier for me to read. But we're going to read a couple chapters of this book today, and then you guys can let me know what you think about it. And if you guys like it, we'll keep reading. If you guys don't like it, then we will maybe switch to a different book. Okay? So, Chapter 1, Morley Manor. If Sarah hadn't put the monkey in the bathtub, we might never have had the monsters get big. But she did, so we did. Which, given the way things worked out, was probably just as well for everyone on the planet, especially the dead people. I bought the monsters at a garage sale. Actually, it was more like a whole house sale, and not just any house. It was Morley Manor, the huge old place at the end of Willow Street. Every kid in our town knew Morley Manor. It was the weirdest house in Owl's Roost, Nebraska. So scary that we didn't even trick-or-treat there. It had 3 towers, leaded glass windows, and a big iron fence with spikes on top, though you couldn't see that much of the fence because the base was overgrown with enormous weeds. Each tower had a lightning rod, which is probably the only reason the place hadn't burned down. Lightning seemed to strike there a lot. My father used to claim that Morley Manor had its own weather system. Not only was it darker and gloomier than anywhere else in town, it seemed to be the focus of every thunderstorm that passed through. I was in 6th grade the year Old Man Morley died. I know it's not polite to call him that, but it's the name that everyone used in town, including all the old people. He didn't leave a will as far as anyone knew. He didn't have any relatives. So the state claimed the house and put it up for sale. Despite the fact that we all thought the place was weird, we were really upset to find out that the guy who finally bought it had planned to tear the old mansion down and build a new house altogether. "You can't blame him," said my mother, when we were discussing this in the back room of the flower shop that she and Dad own. "I can't imagine anyone wanting to live in that old monstrosity." She adjusted a chrysanthemum, looked at it critically, then pulled it out of the vase and threw it away. What she said about Morley Manor was true enough, I suppose. But I knew I was going to miss the house, since it was the most interesting place in town. Of course, being the most interesting place in Owl's Roost, Nebraska isn't all that hard. Anyway, the weekend before the Wreckers were supposed to start, my parents went to a florist convention in Los Angeles, leaving Grandma Walker to take care of me and my little sister Sarah. Grandma had been staying with us a lot since Grandpa died 3 months earlier, so Sarah and I were used to having her around. Grandma's pretty deaf, which can make it hard to talk to her, but we never minded when Mom and Dad left her to take care of us. Why would we, when she tended to bake cookies on a daily basis and was a lot less strict about us eating in the living room? That same weekend, the new owner of Morley Manor had a sale to get rid of all the junk inside. Sarah and I figured he was going to use the money to pay the wreckers. The sale was on a Sunday afternoon. The demolition was supposed to start the next morning, which was Columbus Day. Since we kids had the day off from school, most of us were planning to be there to watch. Just about everyone in school went to the sale, even though it was pouring rain. After all, it was the only chance we'd ever have to get a look inside the old place. We asked Grandma if she wanted to come with us, but she said no. She acted kind of weird about it, too. But then she had been a little odd ever since Grandpa died. I could understand. His funeral was the worst day of my life, and I knew Grandma loved him even more than I did, though that was hard to imagine. I hadn't slept very well for the first month after he died, and I had cried a lot. I still have one of his old pipes in my sock drawer. Sometimes I take it out and smell it just to remember him better. Anyway, with Mom and Dad out of town and Grandma Walker deciding to be a homebody, Sarah and I went to the sale on our own, sheltering ourselves from the pelting rain with the big black umbrella that used to belong to Grandpa. "You sure you don't want to go?" we asked again just before we left. Grandma shook her head. "It makes me too sad." "Why does it make you sad?" asked Sarah. Asking questions is sort of a hobby with her. She's like a hunter-gatherer for information. When she was a baby, and I swear I'm not making this up, her first word wasn't mommy or daddy or even no. It was, "Why?" She has been saying it about 3,000 times a day ever since. Grandma sighed. "I'd just rather remember the house the way it used to be." "You've been inside Morley Manor?" I asked in astonishment. As far as we kids knew, no one except Mr. Morley had been inside the place for years. "Oh, I used to go visit there all the time," she said. Until her face got all puckered up, and she shook her head. It's not something I like to talk about," she said. "Now you children run along and have a good time." Then she shooed us out the door. Sarah and I stood on the porch for a minute, just looking at each other. "Do you suppose she knows what it was?" she asked at last. By it, she meant the horrible thing that happened at Morley Manor 50 years ago. Every kid in town knew something happened there, but none of us knew what it was. "Could be," I said. "We're going to have to work on her." That would be mostly Sarah's job, of course. If the family's official question machine, she could be counted on to do everything possible to dig out that information. "Ooh, this place is spooky," said Sarah as we walked through the big iron gate at the entrance to Morley Manor. "Really spooky," she added. After we had climbed the porch and stepped inside, I thought about shouting "Boo!" just to see if I could get her to jump, but decided against it. There were too many people around. Besides, something about Morley Manor made you feel like you ought to be quiet. It had high ceilings, dark woodwork, and doors just as creaky as you would have expected. You could see it must have been beautiful once, but you could also see why no one wanted to live in it now. It looked as if the weather system my father had talked about had existed inside the walls as well. The house was damp and moldy, and peeling wallpaper hung down in long strips, leaving bare spots where dark patches of mildew had started to grow. But it wasn't just the look of the place that made it spooky, it was the feeling you got when you were inside. I just can't really explain it, since I had never felt anything like it. Let's just say that it was easy to imagine secret passages with weird things lurking in them. Things waiting to get you if you were stupid enough to be in there after dark. I found a lot of stuff I wanted to buy. Weird little statues, candle holders shaped like demons, a chest set with stone pieces that looked like they had been carved out of someone's nightmare. But they were all too expensive. Way too expensive. Given the fact that I had spent almost all of my money on a new batch of trading cards a few days earlier. Then Sarah found something I thought I could afford, though it was hard to tell since it didn't have a price tag. Herbie Fluke, one of the kids from my class, and I were studying a roped-off stairway that had a sign saying, "Absolutely no one past this point," and discussing what would happen if we did go past that point, when Sarah grabbed my sleeve and said, "Come here, Anthony, I want to show you something." I didn't go right away. I didn't want Herbie to get the idea that I would do something just because my kid sister wanted me to. After a minute, I followed her to the library. Yeah, Morley Manor was so fancy it had its own library. Only the place smelled pretty bad because the books had gotten all moldy, which I thought was really sad. Look, she said proudly. Sitting on a small table was something that looked like a wooden cigar box. Carved into its top was a strange design of interlocking circles. I didn't see that when I was in here before, I said. It was hidden behind the encyclopedia, replied Sarah, nodding towards one of the shelves. This old guy was looking through stuff in here and he pointed it out to me. I thought you might want it for your cards. I snorted. I couldn't fit all my cards in there. I know that, but when you go to shows and swaps and stuff, it would be good for carrying the best ones. She was right, but I didn't want to admit it too quickly. I lifted the box and gave it a good looking over, checking to make sure that it was solid, and it didn't have any rot or anything. Then I sniffed it because I didn't want to take something home that smelled mildewy. To my surprise, it had kind of a spicy odor. It's locked, I said, wrinkling my brow. So, you can take care of that. Sometimes I get the impression that Sarah thinks I can do anything, which is nice, but it's also a little nerve-wracking since I don't want to do anything that would show I can't. In this case, she was probably right. I could find some way to open the box. I flipped it over again to see how much it cost. It doesn't have a price tag, I said disapprovingly. Sarah rolled her eyes. So go ask how much they want for it. It probably won't be that much. And remember, you don't have to pay what they ask for the first time. People always make deals at this kind of sale. I know that, I said, which was true if you considered that I knew it now that she had said it. I figured she was probably right since she had been to enough garage sales with my mother to be an expert by now. I looked at the box for a minute longer. Then, mostly to put off making a decision, I suggested we go look at some other stuff. I hid the box under the desk before we left the room so no one would buy it while I was making up my mind. Going off to look at other stuff was fine with Sarah. She loves this kind of old junk. But I couldn't stop thinking about that box, and after a few minutes, I went back to examine it again. Finally, I took it to the gray-haired woman sitting at the card table in the front room. I didn't recognize her and wondered if the new owner had brought in someone from out of town to run the sale, to make sure he didn't get cheated. Or maybe she was the new owner. So, how much do you want for this dumb box? I asked, trying to sound cool. She took it from my hands, studied it for a moment, and then said, $5. I could feel my eyes bulge, but I tried not to make a choking sound. How about $1? I asked. The woman laughed out loud, and I could feel myself start to blush. $2? I asked. $4, she replied, without batting an eye. Well, that was progress. Maybe Sarah was right. How about $2.50? I suggested. As I did, I realized something weird. Now that I had started to try to buy the box, I really wanted it. So much that it was almost scary. The woman narrowed her eyes. $3.50, she said in a firm voice. And that was as low as she would go, which was a lot better than $5, but still a problem since I only had $2.37 in my pocket. When I realized that, I was actually relieved that she hadn't said yes to my offer for $2.50, since I would have looked really stupid counting out the change and coming up 13 cents short. I thought about going home and trying to hit up my grandmother for some money, but I was afraid someone would buy the box while I was gone, even if I hid it again. So I went to see if I could squeeze some money out of Sarah. I found her in one of the bedrooms trying on old hats. Do you like this? She asked when I came into the room. She was wearing something blue and fuzzy that didn't look bad on her. It looks stupid, I said, just like I always did when she asked me if I liked something. She made a face. Don't be such a snot, Anthony. She was right. I shouldn't be a snot, especially if I wanted to borrow money from her. She noticed I was carrying the box. Did you buy it? She asked, looking pleased. I shook my head. I don't have enough money. How much do you have? She looked nervous. I'll pay you back, I said, exasperated. You still owe me $1 from last week. I've got it at home. You just never asked for it. I did, too. Look, all I need is $1.13. She frowned. I want to buy this hat. The hat was $1.50. Sarah had $2. I felt as if I was trapped inside a math problem. "Let's see if we can make a deal," said Sarah. The woman didn't look exactly pleased to see me, so I let Sarah do the talking. Having a cute little sister is not always a bad thing. Sarah twinkled and pleaded and pouted, and the next thing I knew, the woman had sold us both the hat and the box for $4.30. We argued all the way home about how much I owed Sarah. The argument stopped when we walked through the front door, and Mr. Perkins bit me. Chapter 2. Monkey Business. Mr. Perkins is my mother's monkey. Mom bought him last year when she turned 40. She had said she always wanted a monkey when she was a kid, but her parents wouldn't let her have one. "I can have a midlife crisis or a midlife monkey," she announced on her 40th birthday. "I've decided to go for the monkey." My father wasn't entirely amused, but he decided that having a monkey was better than my mother going bananas. I think he was secretly afraid that if he didn't get her the monkey, she might decide she wanted to have another baby instead. Anyway, that's how we got Mr. Perkins. I have to admit that up until the day we actually got the little beast, I figured it would be cool to have a monkey. Then Mom brought him home, and I found out how loud, smelly, and cranky monkeys really are. Also, they like to pee on your head, which Mr. Perkins has done twice to me. Anyway, when we came through the door, Mr. Perkins was lurking on top of the coat tree, which is one of his favorite places. As soon as he saw us, he jumped down and bit me on the ankle. Not hard enough to break the skin. I swear he knows that if he did that, Mom would get rid of him. Nope, just a little bit hard enough to startle me into yelling and dropping the box. Instantly, Mr. Perkins grabbed it and ran away as if he knew that was the thing he could do that would bother me the most. "Hey!" I shouted. "You bring that back!" Sarah and I began chasing the monkey around the house, making so much noise that after a while, even Grandma Walker heard the uproar and came to help us. Grandma Walker is my father's mother, by the way. My mother's mother won't visit us now that Mom has a monkey. She takes it personally. Working together, the three of us finally cornered Mr. Perkins behind my father's reading chair, and I managed to get the box back. "Man, I hope he didn't scratch it," I said bitterly, examining the wood for any signs of damage. But the box was not harmed, which relieved me more than I would have expected. The only good thing about all the fuss was that by the time it was over, Sarah gave up bugging me about how much I owed her, probably because she could tell I was in such a totally bad mood that it wouldn't do her any good. I took the box into my room and slammed the door behind me. Then I got out my set of miniature screwdrivers. Grandpa Walker had given them to me for my last birthday, which had been just a month before he died. He gave them to me because I had always liked playing with them when I visited him at the farm. He used to use them for the model railroads he liked to build, but he had dropped that hobby when his hands got too shaky. Sometimes I wonder if the reason he had passed them on to me was that he knew he was going to die soon. After carefully unwrapping the screwdrivers, which Grandpa had kept folded in a black cloth pouch, I began to study the box. How was I supposed to open the thing? I tried sticking the smallest screwdriver into the keyhole and wiggling it around. No luck. I didn't want to break the lock, though I was willing to do that if I had to, but I wasn't sure I could do it without damaging the wood, and that I did not want to do. I turned the box around to examine the hinges. They were held on by tiny screws. Still using the smallest of screwdrivers, I tried to loosen them. As I was working, the box seemed to get warmer, which was truly weird. I thought about stopping, but my curiosity had the best of me, and I was dying to see what was inside. After a lot of fussing, I managed to get the screws out. Then I pried the hinges off. The darn box still wouldn't open. Frustrated, I poked the tip of the slightly larger screwdriver between the lid and the body of the box and tried to ease them apart. Just when I was about to stop, for fear of breaking Grandpa's screwdriver, the lid made a horrible squeak and moved up about a half an inch. At the same time, my desk lamp began to flicker. Again, I thought about stopping. It was too late. Something like fog came pouring over the edge of the box, and a green glow showed through the opening. Suddenly, a crackle of tingling energy shot up my fingers. "Yow!" I cried. When I let go of the lid, it slammed back onto the body of the box so fast it was almost as if it had been sucked down. When I let go of I stared at the box, torn between terror and deep curiosity. When I finally got up enough courage, I reached forward and touched it again. Just a little tap with the tip of my finger. I pulled my hand back quickly. Nothing happened. I tried again. Still nothing. Must have been some weird buildup of static electricity, I told myself, but I wasn't entirely convinced. I decided to go get something to eat, mostly as a way of putting off making a decision about opening the box. Part of me had begun to think it was a bad idea. Part of me was dying to see what was inside. And yet another part of me was afraid that once I did get it open, I would find nothing interesting at all, which was a different kind of scary. I had lunch, and then watched some cartoons with Sarah, which is fun, but you can really bug her by telling her how stupid the plots for Scooby-Doo always are. 2 hours later, I went back to my room. It's just a box, for Pete's sake, I told myself. Even so, I was plenty nervous, and I slid it towards me to try and open it again. The lid creaked as I pried it up. But this time, there was no fog, no tingle. I did see the green glow again, but it vanished as soon as I got the lid all the way open. Sort of the reverse of the light in the refrigerator. Under the lid was another lid. This one was made of wood too, though a lighter shade, and had a pair of knobs, one on each side, which I figured were for lifting it out. Painted in the center was a fancy circle. In the center of the circle, written in bold black letters, were the words, Martin Morley's Little Monsters. Below that, in very fine print, it said, Open not this box, lest my curse fall upon you. Yeah, right, I muttered. It looked like Old Man Morley was even kookier than everyone had thought. Grabbing the knobs, I pulled out the second lid. I gasped in delight. The box was divided into 5 compartments, and inside each compartment was a metal statue of a tiny monster. 3 appeared to be male, 2 female. They were very detailed, beautifully made, and extremely weird. At the base of each compartment was an engraved nameplate. I had to rub them clean with a tissue before I could read them. I blinked. According to the nameplates, the monsters' names were Gaspar, Albert, Ludmilla, Melisande, and Bob. Weird names for a bunch of monsters, I muttered as I picked up Gaspar. At least, I assumed it was Gaspar. It was possible someone had played with the monsters and put them back in the wrong slots. The little monster was about 5 inches tall. He had a head like a lizard's, stuck on top of a muscular, man-like body. A spiny crest rose from the top of his head and disappeared under the neck of his lab coat. A long, powerful tail extended from the back of his ragged trousers. He looked and felt as if he were made of solid brass. I fooled around with him a little, making him bounce across my desk and growl and stuff. Then I stood him at the edge of the box and took out the next figurine, which was Albert. Albert was about an inch shorter than Gaspar, and seemed to be a typical mad scientist assistant. A fierce-looking hunchback with shaggy hair and a squinty face. His hands stretched forward in a grabbing gesture, as if he had been frozen in mid-action. Whoever had made him was really good. He even had a patch sewn onto the back of his coarse tunic to make room for his hump. This was all done in brass, of course, but the effect was very realistic. Still holding Albert, I looked at the others. Ludmilla was a sort of vampire lady. She had a cape wrapped around her, big eyes, and a pair of fangs that poked down over her lower lip. Melisande had snakes for hair. Bob looked like your basic wolf man, a human form, with a snarling wolf-like face that was, oddly enough, kind of cute. He was in a slight crouch, as if ready to spring at something. The detail work on all 5 of the monsters was amazing. Melisandre's face, for example, had tiny, delicate scales, and she was wearing a slinky, skin-tight dress that seemed to have scales also. I began to wonder if the figurines might be more valuable than I had expected. I was about to set Albert next to Gaspar so I could examine Ludmilla, when Sarah shrieked, "Anthony, help!" Her voice was coming from the bathroom. Still holding Albert, I pushed away from my desk and raced down the hall. The bathroom door was half open. I could hear running water and angry chattering. I groaned. Sarah was trying to give Mr. Perkins a bath again. "You get back in that tub," she ordered the monkey as I came through the door. The floor was like a swamp. Sarah was half soaked herself, and her damp hair lay flat on her forehead. Mr. Perkins, soaking wet, clung to my sister's neck, screeching and hissing. What really griped me was that he didn't bite her, and he probably wouldn't no matter how angry he got. Me, he bites out of sheer spite. My pukey little sister could tie a knot in his tail, and he still wouldn't set a tooth in her skin. "Anthony," cried Sarah again, "help!" What does she expect me to do? If I got near the monkey, he was sure to take a chunk out of me. I set Albert on the back of the toilet and made a couple of moves as if to help Sarah, but my heart wasn't in it, especially when Mr. Perkins turned towards me and bared those nasty little fangs. I really don't know what my mother was thinking when she bought him. As it turns out, Sarah didn't really need my help. A minute later, she had Mr. Perkins off her neck and back in the bathtub. It was like turning on a blender. Water splashed all over the place. When we were finally done shampooing and toweling Mr. Perkins, I helped with the toweling because he couldn't bite me through the thick cloth. I noticed that some water had splashed onto Albert's hand. When I had said something about it, Sarah wanted to know where the little monster had come from. I ended up showing her the whole set, which she thought was pretty cool. 2 more strange things happened that night. The first came after supper when we were cleaning up the kitchen. Grandma had been reading the newspaper and had left it on the table. Sarah glanced at it, then grabbed my arm. "Anthony," she hissed, "that's him." "Who's him?" I asked. "What are you talking about?" "Him," she said, pointing to the paper. "That's the old man who showed me the box you bought today." I picked up the paper and felt a cold chill shiver down my spine. The paper was a few days old, and the article was about the sale to be held at Morley Manor, the sale we had gone to that day. In the picture, it was labeled, "Martin Morley, recently deceased owner of Morley Manor." "You're crazy," I said. "He is dead." "He may be dead," replied Sarah, "but I swear I saw him." She looked really nervous. I didn't believe her. I didn't want to believe her, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. As if that wasn't enough, something even stranger happened when I was getting ready to go to bed. I hadn't thought any more about Albert's hand getting wet until I decided to take a last look at the monsters before I went to sleep. Then I saw his hand had changed color. The brass tones transformed into a dark, fleshy shade. I got mad because I figured the water had damaged whatever Albert was made of. But when I touched his hand, I drew my finger back, my anger quickly shifting to fear. The little monster's hand was no longer hard and metallic. Now it felt warm and fleshy. I picked up the figurine and stared at it. To my horror, its fingers began to move. All right, so that was the first 2 chapters of The Monsters of Morley Manor. Sounds like we've got some interesting things going on. One of these statues, after getting wet, is starting to move, which is kind of creepy. And also, the person we bought this box from, it seems as though is the man who owned the manor that we think is supposed to be dead. So, let me know if you really like this book, because I really want to keep reading this book with you guys. If you really like it, let me know. If you don't, we'll see if we can find something else to read. Okay? Thank you guys for listening to my read aloud, and hopefully I'll get to read this again for you guys soon. Have a good day, guys.